I used to go jogging almost every evening after work. It wasn't anything intense, just a few miles around the quiet neighborhood trails near the edge of town. I'm 27, and running was my way to clear my head after sitting at a desk all day. The trail I liked most wound through a small stretch of woods behind an old park. It was peaceful, especially around sunset when the trees filtered the orange light and everything felt calm. Most people avoided that route once it got dark because there weren't any lights, but I actually liked the solitude. I'd put in my earbuds, keep a steady pace, and enjoy how still it felt. The only sounds were my shoes hitting the dirt and the occasional rustle of leaves. But over the past week, something about that trail started to feel different. The air felt heavier, like the woods were holding their breath. And every so often, I'd get that prickling feeling on the back of my neck, like someone was matching my pace, just a few steps behind me. The first time it happened, I brushed it off completely. I was about halfway through my usual route when I thought I heard another set of footsteps behind me. At first, I figured someone else was out running, though it was rare to see anyone there after dark. I slowed down and turned around, expecting to see a flashlight beam or another jogger's silhouette. But there was nothing, just the still trees, swaying slightly in the breeze. I told myself it was just the echo of my own footsteps bouncing off the trees. It's easy to imagine things when you're alone and tired. I laughed it off, turned my music back up, and kept going. A few nights later, I started noticing small things along the trail. A discarded water bottle that wasn't there before. A single black glove sitting on a bench near the start of the woods. Once, I even spotted a hoodie draped over a low branch, like someone had hung it up to dry. None of it seemed too strange on its own, but the random items started to feel deliberate, like someone wanted me to notice them. Then came the whispers, or maybe it was just wind. When I'd slow down to stretch, I'd hear faint rustling from deeper in the trees. I told myself it was just animals, but sometimes it sounded like low voices, just on the edge of hearing. By the fourth night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every time I turned a corner, I expected to see someone waiting. My heart would pound harder than it should have for an easy run. Still, I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. The woods hadn't changed. The trail was the same. It was just me, overthinking, tired, maybe a little jumpy. At least, that's what I tried to believe. The night everything changed started out like any other. I remember checking my phone. It was around 7:30, just before the sun fully disappeared. I told myself I'd do one last jog through the trail before heading home. It had rained earlier, so the ground was soft and the air smelled like wet leaves. I remember that smell clearly. It's burned into my memory now. About 10 minutes into the run, I noticed something strange near one of the wooden benches halfway down the trail. There were footprints, bare footprints, pressed into the damp soil. They were small, almost childlike, and fresh enough that water still glistened in the impressions. That didn't make sense. No one would be walking barefoot here in the cold. I crouched for a moment, shining my phone's flashlight over them. The prints led off the trail into the trees, but I couldn't see where they ended. I told myself it was nothing, maybe kids messing around earlier, but my stomach twisted. Still, I kept jogging. A few minutes later, I began hearing something new, soft breathing. Not mine. I'd stop running, hold my breath, and it would stop too. The second I moved again, it returned. Steady, controlled, as if someone was pacing me just a few steps behind the darkness. I pulled out one earbud to listen more clearly, and that's when I heard it, a whisper. Faint, hoarse, like someone exhaling words they didn't want heard. I couldn't make out what it said, but it was definitely a voice. Panic kicked in. I spun around with my flashlight, the beam cutting through fog that had begun to settle low over the ground. The trees stood like tall, silent walls, but there, just for a second, I thought I saw movement. A figure ducking behind a trunk, maybe 20 feet away. I froze. My throat went dry. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound calm. Nothing. No answer. Only the faint creak of branches swaying above me. I turned back toward the path and started running, faster this time. My chest burned, but adrenaline kept me going. Behind me, I swore I heard the crunch of footsteps in sync with mine. When I finally reached the open park again, I didn't look back. That night, I told myself it was probably a hiker, maybe a homeless person passing through. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. There was something wrong out there, something that wanted me to come back. I didn't plan on going back the next night, but curiosity, or maybe stupidity, got the better of me. I kept replaying that moment in my head, convincing myself I must have imagined it. So the following evening, just before sunset, I laced up my shoes again. I told myself I'd stick to the main loop, skip the deeper part of the trail, and head home early. The woods were quieter than usual, almost unnaturally so. Even the birds had stopped making noise. My footsteps felt too loud on the dirt path. Halfway through the run, I saw it again. Those same barefoot prints, this time fresher, leading in both directions. They weren't small anymore. They looked bigger, heavier, like someone had been running. That's when I heard it, a sharp crack behind me like a branch snapping underweight. I turned, expecting maybe a deer. Instead, through the thinning light, I saw a figure standing just off the trail. Motionless, watching me. They were tall, wearing dark, soaked clothing that clung to their body. I couldn't see their faces, only the faint outline of their head tilting, like they were studying me. My stomach dropped. I took a cautious step back. "Hey," I said, voice trembling. "Are you okay?" No answer. The figure just shifted slightly, and then, without warning, started walking toward me. Slow at first. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. The sound of their footsteps thundered behind me, faster and heavier than mine. I didn't dare look back. I could hear them gaining, their breathing rough and wet, like someone gasping through water. I sprinted through the final stretch, my flashlight bouncing wildly. When I broke out of the woods and saw the faint glow of the park lights, I didn't stop. I ran straight to my car, yanked the door open, and locked it behind me. For a second, I sat there shaking, watching the dark tree line. Then I saw movement again, just a flicker of black between the trunks. Whoever, or whatever, it was had stopped at the edge of the woods, watching me leave. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying everything, the footprints, the whispers, the figure. My body still felt like it was running even hours later. I double-checked every lock in my house and left the hallway light on, just listening for sounds that weren't there. The next morning, I went to the police station and tried to explain what happened. The officer was polite, but I could tell he didn't really believe me. He said they'd send someone to check the trail, but when I followed up later that week, they told me nothing was found. No footprints, no sign of anyone. Just empty woods. I stopped jogging completely after that. Even driving past that park now makes my chest tighten. But every so often, I'll get a faint reminder, the smell of wet leaves, the echo of a footstep behind me when I'm alone, that same feeling of being watched. Last night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of light tapping on my bedroom window. I told myself it was just a tree branch. I still haven't gone to check. I usually go jogging early in the mornings before work. It's the quietest time, no cars, no people, just fog and the faint sound of birds waking up. I'm 30, and running is my therapy. I live near a lake on the edge of town, surrounded by old forest trails and narrow dirt paths that wind close to the water. Most people avoid that area before sunrise because it's always dark and misty, but that's exactly why I liked it. I'd run with a small headlamp, my breath fogging in the cold air, music low in my ears. There was something peaceful about watching the world still half asleep. But a few weeks ago, I started noticing something odd. Around the far side of the lake, where the trail curves behind a line of thick pines, I'd see faint lights. Not flashlights, exactly. More like a flicker, low to the ground, almost like candles. At first, I figured kids were hanging out there, or maybe someone camping illegally. But after the third morning, when I saw the same flicker in the exact same spot, I realized it wasn't random. Someone, or something, was waiting there every morning before I even arrived. The next few mornings, I tried to ignore it. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, that maybe light was reflecting off the lake or from a passing car somewhere beyond the trees. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. The flicker came from deep inside the woods, too far from any road, too steady to be a trick of the light. On the fourth morning, curiosity got the better of me. I slowed down as I reached that curve and turned off my headlamp for a moment. The trail disappeared into darkness, except for that faint golden glow seeping through the tree trunks. I listened. Nothing, no voices, no movement. Just the gentle ripple of the lake. Then as I stood there, I swear I heard something, a quiet scraping sound like metal against stone. That noise stayed in my head all day. I told my coworker about it later, trying to make it sound like a joke, but even saying it out loud felt wrong. He laughed and said maybe it was a fisherman or someone lighting a campfire. But there's no camping allowed there, and I'd never seen a single person that early. A few mornings later, I found something that made my stomach drop. Right at the spot where the trail curved, where I'd seen that glow, I found a small pile of stones arranged in a perfect circle. In the center, a burned-out candle stub. I kicked the stones over and kept running, trying to shake off the unease. But the next morning, it was there again, the same circle, the same candle newly burned down. That's when I stopped pretending it was nothing. I started feeling like whoever was doing it knew my routine. They knew I came through that spot every morning, around the same time, and they wanted me to see what they were leaving behind. The morning it all escalated. Fog had rolled in so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. Everything looked muted and colorless, like the world was holding its breath. I remember thinking I should turn back, but my stubbornness kept me moving forward. I didn't want to admit that the trail I'd always loved was starting to scare me. As I neared the curve, I noticed something different. The flicker wasn't in its usual place. It was closer, much closer, like whoever was lighting it had moved toward the main path. My pulse picked up. I slowed down and switched off my headlamp again. The faint light shimmered through the mist, and I could see the outline of another circle of stones, but this one wasn't empty. There was something inside it. A shoe. Muddy, worn, and far too small to belong to an adult. My throat went dry. I crouched down to look closer, my breath clouding in front of me, and that's when I heard it, the crunch of gravel behind me. Slow, steady footsteps, moving in rhythm with mine. I spun around, my light cutting through the fog, but there was no one there. Only the faint shape of trees and the shimmer of lake water beyond. My heartbeat was so loud it drowned out everything else. I started backing away, still shining the light around, whispering, "Hello? Is someone there?" No answer. Then another crunch, this time off the trail, in the trees, followed by a soft, dragging sound, like someone pulling something heavy through wet leaves. That was enough for me. I turned and ran, faster than I ever had before. The fog made it impossible to see, but I didn't care. I just ran until I reached the main road, chest burning, my legs shaking so bad I could barely stand. When I finally looked back, the fog had swallowed the trail again. But right before I turned away, I saw a shape standing where the path disappeared, a tall, thin silhouette, perfectly still, holding something that flickered faintly in the mist. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that faint light hovering in the fog, and that still figure watching me from the trail. By morning, I'd convinced myself it had to be someone messing around, maybe a local trying to scare joggers. So I went back, this time in full daylight. The woods looked ordinary again. Birds were chirping, and the sunlight cut through the trees like nothing had ever happened. I almost laughed at how normal it felt, but when I reached that same curve in the trail, I froze. The circle of stones was there again, but now there were 3 of them, perfectly aligned across the dirt path. And in the middle of the center circle lay my shoe. The one I'd lost that morning in the fog when I was running like hell. I didn't stay to think about it. I backed away slowly, then turned and jogged out, never looking behind me. But that night, while I was brushing my teeth, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. There was dried mud on the floor near my bedroom window, the same reddish clay from the trail. I tried to convince myself I'd tracked it in without realizing, but the pattern was too distinct. Bare footprints. Small ones, just like the ones that led to that first candle circle. I barely slept again. Every creak of the house made my skin crawl. Around 2 a.m., I heard a faint tapping, 3 slow knocks, coming from my living room window. I lay frozen, staring at the dark ceiling, too terrified to move. The tapping came again, then stopped. When I finally gathered the courage to look in the morning, there was nothing outside. Just the soft imprint of a small, muddy hand pressed against. But sometimes before dawn, I still see a faint orange flicker through the trees behind my house, right where the woods begin. After that, I quit jogging entirely. I stopped going near the lake, avoided the forest trails, and even changed my morning routine. I thought maybe if I ignored it, whatever it was would go away. But ignoring it didn't help. I started noticing small things around my apartment, muddy footprints that weren't mine, objects slightly moved, and faint scratches on the window frame. I called the police once, trying to explain everything, the circles of stones, the candle, the footprints, and the flickering light. They were polite, but I could tell they thought I was exaggerating. No reports were ever filed, no one found anything in the woods. It was like it had vanished completely. Even now, weeks later, I still feel watched. Some mornings, I wake up to the faint smell of damp earth and smoke, like someone or something has been outside. I've considered moving, but the thought of leaving feels like admitting defeat to whatever has been following me. Last night, I heard it again, the soft scraping of stones across dirt, just outside my window. I didn't look. I can't. But I know it's still there, waiting, and maybe it always will be. I've always been a night runner. There's something about the city streets after dark, empty sidewalks, streetlights reflecting on wet asphalt, the quiet hum of distant traffic, that makes running feel almost peaceful. I'm 24, and running late at night is how I clear my head after long shifts at the hospital. A few months ago, I discovered a trail on the outskirts of town. It's mostly abandoned, flanked by thick woods and a narrow creek. At first, it was perfect. No one around, just me, my headphones, and the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes. I liked being alone, pushing myself, losing track of time. But almost immediately, something about the trail felt off. Even in the daylight, the trees leaned oddly over the path, and the creek's edge was always misty, no matter the season. At night, the shadows seemed to move differently. I'd catch glimpses of shapes at the corner of my eye, or hear branches snapping as if someone, or something, was pacing me just beyond the tree line. The first time I brushed it off as imagination. The second time, my heart sank. And by the third night, I realized that something was waiting for me on that trail, and it had learned my schedule. The first few nights, I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. I'd hear twigs snapping behind me, quick movements in the shadows, or the faint rustle of leaves when there was no wind. I'd slow down, glance over my shoulder, and see nothing, but the feeling of being watched stayed. My pace quickened, but the sensation didn't leave me. One night, I noticed something strange on the path itself. Small stones, carefully arranged in a line across the trail, almost like a crude marker. I kicked them aside, trying to laugh it off, but the unease didn't fade. Then came the whispers. Faint at first, like the wind through the trees, just barely audible. I'd stop running, holding my breath, but the soft murmur never really went away. A few mornings later, I saw footprints. Bare footprints in the gravel, following the trail in the direction I'd come from. But the weird part was that they ended abruptly in the middle of the path, as if whoever, or whatever, had vanished into thin air. My stomach twisted. I told myself it had to be some prankster or another runner messing with me, but no one else had ever been on that trail at that hour. Then the lights started. Not flashlights, not headlights, just tiny pinpricks of light flickering between the trees. I swear I could feel them moving with me, shifting position when I turned my head, always just far enough away that I couldn't see anyone. By the fifth night, I was on edge before I even started running. I double-checked my route, ran with my phone out, and kept my ears clear of music. Every step felt louder than it should, every shadow deeper. I knew something was following me, pacing me, learning me, and I was starting to feel trapped. The trail, which I'd once loved for its solitude, had become a place of constant dread. That night, the escalation hit me full force. Fog had rolled in low over the trail, clinging to the trees and turning the path into a gray blur. My headlamp barely cut through it. Every step felt heavier, like the air itself was pressing down on me. Then I heard it, footsteps, soft at first, matching my pace. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I spun around, shining my light, but there was nothing. Just fog, trees, and the faint ripple of the creek beside the trail. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but the crunch of gravel behind me continued. Slow, methodical, always just a few feet away. Then came a whisper, barely audible, raspy, like someone exhaling my name. "Hey," it breathed. I jerked my head toward the sound, and for a fleeting second, I saw a shadow between two trees, a dark figure hunched, too tall to be a kid. I couldn't make out details, but I knew I wasn't alone. Panic started to set in. I ran faster, my shoes slapping the gravel, arms pumping, lungs burning. The footsteps accelerated behind me, faster than mine. Then, just as I neared a small clearing by the creek, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. A figure darted across the trail, just ahead of me, disappearing into the fog. I stumbled but didn't stop, heart hammering, feeling its presence behind me, close enough to touch. The whispers came again, faster, overlapping, like multiple voices. I dared a glance over my shoulder, something solid, moving with me, keeping pace effortlessly. Finally, I broke into the open part of the trail near the main road. The city lights glimmered ahead, and the sound of cars seemed impossibly loud compared to the whispers and footsteps behind me. I didn't slow down until I was on the sidewalk, gasping for air, drenched in sweat, trembling all over. When I looked back into the fog at the trail, it was empty. No figure, no light, no footprints. Just the quiet, deceptive calm of the woods. But I knew it had been there, tracking me, learning me, and it wasn't done. I didn't plan on returning, but something inside me, a mix of fear and stubbornness, made me lace up again a few nights later. This time, I promised myself I'd stick to the main path and keep the run short. The fog was thicker than ever, curling around tree trunks like ghostly fingers. My breath fogged in front of me, and the world felt muted, unreal. Halfway through I saw it, a shape standing just off the trail, barely visible in the dim light of my headlamp. At first, I thought it was a hiker or another runner, but it wasn't moving naturally. It just stood there, tall, dark, and still, almost like it was waiting. My heart hammered as I tried to make out details. The figure's head tilted slightly, following my movement. I whispered, "Hello," but my voice sounded foreign in the thick, wet air. No reply, only that suffocating silence. Then it moved. Slow at first, deliberate, but quickly it picked up pace, closing the distance. I bolted. My legs burned, lungs on fire, heart in my throat. Every step I took, I could hear it behind me. Footsteps heavier than mine, crunching on gravel, never faltering. Branches lashed my face as I darted through the trail. My headlamp bounced wildly, catching glimpses of a hunched figure, always just a few steps behind. I could feel its presence closing in, its shadow brushing the edges of the fog, like it was learning my running rhythm. Finally, I broke into the small clearing near the creek, the glow of streetlights ahead like a promise of safety. I didn't stop running until I was on the sidewalk, gasping, drenched in sweat and shaking. When I glanced back, the trail was empty. No figure, no footsteps, no flickering light. Just fog and trees, serene and silent, hiding the thing that had followed me so effortlessly. Even now, I can't shake the memory of its slow, deliberate chase, the certainty that it could have caught me if it had wanted to. I never went back to that trail. Not at night, not during the day. I tried to convince myself that whatever it was had no interest in me now that I wasn't running there, but that nagging feeling didn't go away. Sometimes, when I pass by the edge of those woods, I swear I catch a flicker of movement between the trees. I reported the incidents just to the local police, but they didn't find anything. No footprints, no signs of anyone hiding in the woods, nothing to explain the whispers or the figure I'd seen. Friends told me I should have called someone sooner, that maybe it was a person playing games, but I know what I experienced was different. Too deliberate, too patient. Even now, weeks later, I feel it when I run anywhere isolated. A brush of air against my neck, the sound of footsteps that aren't mine, shadows that move just out of reach. I've tried to dismiss it as paranoia, but deep down I know it's still out there, waiting for the next night when I might be alone again. Sometimes, when the street lights flicker outside my apartment, I catch a faint silhouette in the distance, just standing, just watching. And I wonder if it's still learning.